It is not the organizations that compete, rather, they are supply chains that need to stay ahead of the rest. Though obscure, these words ring true in today's new post-pandemic world. Hello everyone, I am Rachayata, and I welcome you all to another session of Leaders Speak with Logistics Insider. In today's session, we will be talking about building resilient supply chains with the help of modern technology. In a fast-paced global supply chain, last mile is a bustling street. Sustainability is top priority, and technology has taken center stage. In fact, in some or the other way, every link in the supply chain is held together by modern-day technology. Blume Global is one such organization that is leading the way in improving modern supply chains with their cutting-edge technology. Their focus is to simplify yet create purposeful supply chains that are highly sustainable. Their end-to-end supply chain orchestration solutions continue to empower manufacturers, shippers, and logistics companies, making their businesses resilient. Blume is also in sync with Gati Shakti National Master Plan, a Government of India initiative for creation of logistics infrastructure and multimodal transportation. With that, I'd like to introduce to you our guest for today, Mr. Pervinder Johar, CEO of Blume Global. He has a decorated background in supply chain management and technology and has been instrumental in providing innovative solutions to global supply chain industry. Leveraging his experience in artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, and blockchain, Mr. Johar is guiding Blume's next wave of transformative solutions to the supply chain marketplace. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's get rolling. My first question to you today is that every supply chain starts with a shipper, be it for procurement or for shipping out the final products. So at their end, how important is it to choose the right carrier in order to minimize the costs and increase efficiency?
I think if you step back and look from shipper perspective, right, so supply chain typically has been talked about 4 different functions. So there is planning, there is sourcing, how do I source products, there is manufacturing itself is a supply chain function, and then there is this function of logistics and order management. Because by definition, chain means that you're working between multiple companies with multiple locations, and the product needs to move through logistics providers or, as you said, carriers between all of those locations. It's a critical function. So for years, I remember when I did my first company about 20 some years back, it was called logistics.com back in late 90s also. And it used to be that logistics was a function which no one had really heard of, even within supply chain. And now kind of it's such a critical function, and having the right partners for your logistics functions is as critical as any other function for a particular company.
Right. So, tell us about your automated carrier selection tool.
So I think one of the things which has been true about transportation, that you cannot have the right transportation provider or the same transportation provider everywhere in the world. So first thing to think of that it's a matter of that where are you operating, who are the motor carriers who are operating at that particular location, the country or the metro area. And then it becomes kind of who has capacity, what contracts do you have, and it can be a kind of a fairly complex process for you to select the right carrier or right motor carrier, or in case of ocean, right shipping line, or right kind of logistics providers. Carrier is just one of the terms, but there are many logistics customers that you are selecting. What we do is that we use kind of a set of machine learning algorithms to monitor the performance of your partners, the carriers that you work with, right? And then we automate how do you select a particular motor carrier or a particular ocean carrier or an air cargo carrier for your route.
Okay. And like talking about the first mile, drayage is said to be the first domino in a row of dominoes that are lined between ship to shelf.
Sure.
Right. and how that first domino falls impacts the entire row.
Yeah.
Right. So how does Blume's load board style marketplace help shippers to make sure that their first domino falls correctly?
So I think when you think of drayage, typically it is for things that are moving into a container. Right? And things that move into container are either things that are moving by ocean from one continent to the other, or via rail. Because even on rail, kind of you have to take a container, put it on a rail car, and that's how it moves. And these companies that you need to use for drayage are typically very specialized. Right? So if you're doing manufacturing in Chongqing, China, the drayage companies in Chongqing, China are kind of are unique to that reason.
Okay.
If you think of Indian context, the drayage company that might be there in southern India versus in Mumbai area or Gujarat, they all are very localized companies.
All right.
So for years, kind of when we founded kind of Blume Global, kind of in 2018, this was an area which was overlooked. And so people did systems for kind of these bigger legs. And so if you think of ocean, you're talking about going from say India to Europe or India to US, that's a big leg, big ship, kind of how do I go manage it? But these small businesses, which actually are the first mile and the last mile, they're both the first and the last. And so if you think of it, if you start with manufacturing somewhere here in India or mining, your first mile is going to be within India, but your last mile is going to be in some other country. So the drayage kind of, the focus that we have on that drayage market is how do you go support these small businesses, make them connect, and without connecting, as you said, kind of those two ends, first mile and the last mile.
Yeah.
The middle mile is interesting, but you can't really kind of link the whole chain unless you have the first mile and the last mile.
Exactly. Right. So on that note, we'd like you to talk about your new product, the Carrier Go, for drayage truckers, the vision behind it. Give us some insights about it.
I think when we founded the company in 18, we looked at kind of 3 different things as the goals for the company. It was our mission. One of them was that the logistics spend at that time around the world was $11 trillion. To put it in context, it's about kind of 3 to 4 times the size of Indian economy is the logistics spend around the world.
Right.
We wanted to use science to make sure we can optimize that spend. And we set a goal of that, how do you use technology to take $1 trillion of cost out of these, this big part of the GDP. Second one though was how do you democratize technology for these small businesses? And these small businesses are these drayage companies. Right? So typically kind of if you're running, if you have even 100 trucks kind of in Mumbai, your IT spend is not that large. Right? So you don't really focus on what that system is going to go look like. And it's true everywhere in the world. Right? So if you go to any country in the world, you're going to find that typically the drayage, they may be big in their own context. They're 100 trucks, 20 trucks, 30 trucks, but they're still very small when you compare to the world of Amazon and Walmart and all other shippers. Right? So they're much larger. So this Carrier Go product, we are focused on how do you give kind of a digital operating platform for drayage or even trucking companies for a relatively low cost. And I've been calling it that we're trying to democratize technology for these small businesses, and the Carrier Go is just part of that solution. We have launched it in India, so we have had many customers working with a couple of large logistics service providers that the product is rolled out in India. But now we're trying to make a push for how do you do broader adoption for that product in all of India.
I think that's really a great initiative especially for the small businesses, because like I was reading this article yesterday that said that, small businesses are what is going to make India a big economy and achieve that, the targets for exports or for that matter, the overall economy. So I think this will in fact, and considering that India's trucking industry desperately needs some, organized behavior. So I think that will go a really long way. Now, talking about moving the cargo, once the cargo is on the move, what worries the shipper the most is the visibility. Where is my cargo? What conditions, especially for perishables? So, it's definitely a fact that the more accurate the visibility, the more better it is. And it is one of the buzzwords in the supply chain industry today. So what is your outlook to this critical supply chain ingredient?
Yeah, I think if you think of one couple of things that we talked about, right? So when I look at context for India and the small businesses, the areas that kind of the small businesses can benefit a lot from starts from anywhere from kind of the farming or the agriculture goods that get made in US, kind of exporting them or even moving them within the India. And then visibility is not the same, depends on the product. Right? So if I think of a dry goods, right, now my visibility might be where is my container. But if it's a refrigerated product, you want to know kind of what was the temperature of that refrigerated product throughout the life of that particular journey. Right? What you don't want is that you don't want to have, I will use kind of milk or ice cream as an example. It can't be that kind of it started off, it left the origin, temperature was set well, and it's traveling, and in between something happens to the temperature and all of a sudden the ice cream has melted. And by the time it goes to the end location, it again kind of the temperature is back down to below zero or whatever it needs to be kind of at that level. You're not going to get a good product. Right?
Absolutely.
So visibility, if you think in the context of some of the perishable products, it's about temperature. If you think of produce like bananas, right? So in many of these, when they travel from a farm to the end location, you adjust the CO2 levels to see how the bananas are ripening while they're traveling throughout. Right? Again, if there are delays and then your container is stuck for 2 days or 3 days on an ocean port, you keep on ripening them. By the time they're going to get to the end kind of destination, those are not going to be edible. Right? Kind of there. You look at high tech becomes that things like pressure. Right? So if you take recently now, kind of there's a lot of high-tech manufacturing between Foxconn and kind of what Apple is doing in India. You think of those products, you worry about pressure. You don't want to go drop kind of a pallet of phones or laptops down, because if you have dropped them, all of a sudden they're going to be damaged goods. So visibility is such a critical component. But many people don't understand what visibility really means. Right? So they tend to make it into that, where is my shipment? It really is not about that. It's about the journey of the shipment and what are the things that I need to go and keep an eye on. And now how do I go measure it is what we have been focused on. And it's such a critical component because it reduces waste. It kind of improves the quality of your products and so many other benefits.
Right. It's interesting how you explained it in the context of 3 different things, because generally when we talk about visibility, as you said, it's just where is my shipment, where is my cargo. But that was really nice. So when it comes to buzzwords, resilience is another one of them, especially after the pandemic. And it is absolutely the need of the hour for every logistics company, be it, or rather the whole supply chains. And I would like you to talk about how Blume's supply chain orchestration services help build a resilient supply chain.
I think in supply chain, there are many moving parts. Right? So when we talk about resiliency, it's just normal that something can go wrong.
Right.
Now, what happened during COVID was abnormal only in the sense that a lot of things happened at the same time. And so it became a sequence of things that kept on happening, which is why we talk more about resiliency. But if you think of for decades, we've always had one issue or the other that we had to go deal with. And when we talk about resiliency, it is the supply chain's ability to repair itself when something goes wrong. So that's the simplest way to put it, right? So if you think of our body, when we get a cut, eventually it heals, right? So it's the same thing for supply chains, that how do we become more resilient? And it really becomes that, do you have options? And is there optionality for you to go pick a different provider? So what we do kind of at Blume Global, as an example, we focus in 2 different areas. Now, one is the area of sourcing. Right? So if you're a manufacturer, say auto manufacturers, you work with your component suppliers or other suppliers, If one supplier is not able to deliver, how do you go make sure that you can find other suppliers in a timely fashion? Second area of resiliency is on transportation side, that if you're not able to work with one logistics provider or one transportation provider, how do you go tap into a network? So at Blume now, we have close to 100,000 companies which are now connected to the platform. Right? So it may not be a normal partner that you're working with if you're a shipper, right? But by being on the platform, when things do go wrong, kind of you can find someone else. But it all starts off with kind of doing planning around resiliency and making sure that you're designing your supply chain in a way and you're orchestrating it in a way that you will be resilient when the time comes that you have to tap into some alternative to repair that supply chain.
Right. So do you think supplier diversity is kind of an important link in building resilience?
Absolutely. So I think we have to have diversity of suppliers, and we go back and forth, right? So every few years, kind of, and I've seen it with many large supply chains, we go focus on let's reduce the number of suppliers. And eventually, kind of, and you know, the semiconductor industry example well, we kept on reducing it because scale meant that we need a low cost, right? And then we have the Taiwan semiconductor kind of incident now for last 3-4 years, but it was created by us by saying that we don't need a diverse set of kind of suppliers. Right. And we were all looking for the lowest cost possible. The lowest cost possible came with scale. And with scale, it meant that you didn't really have diversity in your supply base. But it's also diversity in your manufacturing abilities. Right? Are you manufacturing only at one location or multiple locations? Right. Can you source the same SKU or the same item from multiple places or one places? So it's a combination of, I won't say just the supplier diversity. You need kind of just overall diversity in kind of your ability to flex up and down any function within supply chain.
Right. Yeah. So I came through an article that you had penned down recently, and it said that artificial intelligence eliminates inefficiencies and facilitates better decision making, and especially when combined with blockchain and machine learning. And most people in the industry today are already, either they are leveraging these technologies already, or they are on their way to reach there. So we'd like to know your views about how technology can be further exploited to improve our supply chains.
Sure. I think we have long way to go, right? So if you think of kind of supply chain is the oldest profession kind of in the world. And so every since kind of the mankind or humankind kind of started bartering thing, the supply chain was born. Right. The part which is interesting on supply chain is that if you go back 50 years of computing and supply chain, the computing power was not enough for us to be able to look at kind of any decent sized supply chain holistically. Okay? So we kept on breaking it up in areas, right? So I talked about how sourcing, manufacturing, kind of logistics, they all became different areas, and people became specialized in all of those things. Our focus on artificial intelligence or cognitive sciences has been that you're not trying to replace a person. You're trying to figure out that can you have a machine which has collective intelligence of all the domains which are part of the supply chain and make the decision in that particular context. Right? Okay, I think that humans kind of, we do very good job kind of in one function or many of the functions. But not everyone can be a doctor and a lawyer and an engineer and a kind of accountant and all other things at the same time.
Tell me about it.
When it comes to machines, that machines don't have that limit anymore. And compute power has gone to a point that it's not really about that kind of, are we trying to create a better lawyer with the machine? It's back to that, can you have the capabilities kind of in the context of supply chain, kind of can you, law is part of it, right? So when you think of contract management, contract management is a part of procurement function, but procurement people are not lawyers, right? But the machine can be that how you go combine the intelligence of multiple segments and bring it together. So I think the journey will continue for kind of probably decades to come. Versus anything which is kind of just 1 or 2 or 3 years in terms of the technology.
So My next question to you is, how is supply chain technology helping, or it's going to help big and small players of the logistics industry to accurately calculate, monitor, and reduce their emissions from not just logistics, but also the data waste, that there's this new concept. How is that going to work?
Sure. I think the part that you look at kind of on if you talk only about the CO2 emissions. So transportation contributes about 27% of all CO2 emissions around the world. 20% is though consumers. Right. This is all of us driving cars. So it's not really the supply chain, which is the biggest kind of producer of CO2 emissions. It's really the 7%, though still is a big number of the worldwide number on that side. And most companies don't even know kind of what their CO2 footprint looks like. And so from that perspective, kind of we help you measure what that CO2 footprint looks like. And then how do you go and minimize it or optimize it? So people tend to make decisions on only two dimensions in supply chain. It's either speed or cost.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm going to do air cargo, it's going to go fast, but it's going to cost me more money versus ocean. If I do truck, it can go maybe faster than rail, right? But it's going to cost you more money than if you're using rail. So the two dimensions are the only kind of that people have looked at. And what we want to do is that make sure that people look at this third dimension. That what's your impact on the environment, and what's that value, and what's that offset, and how do you go make that holistic decision on that. But when it comes to overall social and environmental responsibility for a supply chain, it doesn't stop at the CO2 emissions. It also is, where are you sourcing products from? Because you need to know what your suppliers are doing. And so you may be carbon efficient, but you may be buying components, or you may be buying from suppliers who are not carbon efficient. Right. So when you look at kind of our sourcing product, right, it again starts measuring not only about what's your CO2 footprint, what's your supply chain CO2 footprint, which becomes even more complex to measure and manage. Because in one case, if it's your own, you can help optimize and make decisions on your own. But when it's your suppliers, you do have to work with them to see that how do you go improve the overall footprint for your supply chain.
So suppliers for these big organizations that are, of course, I really appreciate them, measuring from scope 1 to scope 3. Now people are measuring everything. But when it comes to suppliers, they are mostly, medium or small businesses. So how can they incorporate, this monitoring and analyzing mechanism, keeping in mind that, it's not very costly for them? I mean, this dimension would always be there.
Would always be there. And I think that's where I talked about that whole democratization for small to medium businesses. Right? So if you think of, we all use in our professional life, LinkedIn, many people use social kind of network today we wouldn't have thought of kind of being able to afford those networks kind of for almost everyone in the world. Same thing on the small to medium businesses, right? So these platforms, including our platform, is getting to a point where the price point is low enough where you can actually use a cloud-based platform like ours. See, what used to happen is that if you went and bought a piece of software, the cost of running that software used to be high for these small businesses. So then you have to buy hardware, you have to buy kind of all of the database software and everything else that goes around an application. It was expensive. But with cloud-based model where it's a software as a subscription, the cost has come down to a point where it can be every business in the supply chain who can start measuring it and contributing it.
So talking about software, I was writing something down when I came across this fact that a single algorithm for machine learning creates as much as emissions as as 5 cars produce over their lifetime of running. So since we're talking about sustainability, how do we use technology to reduce digital waste?
Sure. So I think that's kind of an interesting question, because when you think of it, high-tech industry itself is focusing on how they get to zero emissions. Right? So there's been a lot of work that has been done which is around kind of, I used to work for one of the largest high-tech companies kind of for many years before doing this company. But there's been so much work done kind of all the way to eliminating copper in compute, which can actually make a big difference in kind of how compute works itself. But those examples that you talked about are fairly common, because the other example kind of that have read is that people buy these electrical vehicles, right? And then their lifetime is not as long as kind of some of the older vehicles. So question again becomes that, are you better off buying a 5 to 10 year old car versus kind of contributing to every single thing that goes into manufacturing of it? So it's always an interesting question kind of from that perspective. But the reality is that unless you kind of make progress, whether it's through machine learning or other algorithms, over time, kind of that footprint will keep on getting smaller. And I think, but without doing it, kind of you get into another set of issues.
Right. I think it's just, we've just started, and it's going to be one step at one time. So we'll conclude by, I'd like to know what are Blume Global's plan for the near future?
I think for us, we've been very consistent from the time we started the company 5 years back to now. And it's been, the vision has been there to go build a global supply chain orchestration platform using cloud technologies. We are now operating in more than 130 countries, but our level of adoption in different countries is different. And so we are strongest in North America today, then in Asia probably, and then in Europe. Being of Indian origin, kind of India kind of has that focus for us, kind of. So many of the people who are the management team members also have roots in India. So this has been kind of another market that we do want to make sure that we focus on as much focus as we do in US. We want to make sure that we focus on Indian market equally well.
Right. I think it's been a quite, intriguing and informative session. And by what I understand, after talking to Mr. Johar, is that supply chain technology is sure to change the way supply chains work globally. And especially in a growing economy like India, where opportunities are right around the corner, just waiting to be grabbed by the right people at the right time. Blume Global is definitely in it for facilitating transformation of logistics operations. Thank you so much, Mr. Johar, for taking out time and joining us today. And thank you so much to all the audience that have been watching this session.